So, my next is O. He working on his master in computer science, and he will be speaking about tokenizers and language education. So, okay.
Okay, so this lecture is actually follows Kai's lecture. First of all, the lecture is for you, Hatim. I hope it will be discussion and ask questions. Don't feel to interrupt me in the middle, because it's very important that you understand everything, even if we're not finished it, because it might take more than an hour, but it's more important that we'll deep discuss some issues that I will review during the lecture. So after Kai showed us how to train a large language model and explained the architecture of the model, I will discuss and focus on the tokenizer, which is a part of the language model that processes an input text into a representation that the model can interpret. There will be some technical and some issues and some numbers that will show, but don't worry, I will explain everything. The main focus of the lecture and the thing that you need to understand that the tokenizer is the component that is most affected by the language, the source language. And that is why we need you for some issues and questions during the model adaptation. So what are motivation? I want to build a language model for Sanskrit and Tibetan that can perform a variety of tasks. We spoke about it. It can be translation, generation of text, question answering, authors identification like we spoke yesterday, concept matching, and more. We all start from the data that we have. Let's say we are in this part. We have some data, not a lot relatively, as Kai showed us. And the text, as you know, is in its nature very different from English, which is the most covered language among LLMs. The main difference with the language is, first of all, the alphabet is entirely different. Someone asked before about German. German has Latin characters. Obviously, to adapt a model to German from English is easier than those kinds of scripts. There are significant morphological differences, and the nature of the text itself is different. Most of the large language models were trained over the whole internet. It means Facebook comments, news, articles, and everything. The text that you work with are different, not in the only in the language, but also in the semantics, like the stories. So even if we have the same, even if it was the same language, if it was in English, it's different. In addition, we have to do some adaptation to the model in order to train it according to the stuff that you work with. So as Kai showed, when we train an LLM, we wanted to predict the next word. So let's say, I'm sorry in advance, most of my lecture examples will be in Sanskrit, so the Tibetan people, it's not something personal. Let's say this is my beginning of the sentence. Who can read it? It will be, I'm gonna ask a lot of questions, be prepared. So someone that knows how to read IST? How?
My eyes are very bad, but it seems to say Sanjay and Sukina.
Exactly. So Santu, that's what I. And what's the definition of it?
They're both imperative forms, meaning to be. So the whole sentence means, may all beings or may all people be happy.
Okay, great. So first of all, we have a first labeled sentence in Sanskrit. It's it's a great beginning. So what we do want to do, we're gonna talk a little bit about concepts that name transfer learning. Transfer learning, let's say conceptually. Let's say I have a model that knows how to recognize dogs. I give him an image and he tells me either it's a dog or something else. And now it already exists. It's already trained. I want a model that predicts whether an image is a dog or a cat. So what I can do, I can train from scratch a model over dogs and cats, or I can take the model that already knows how to recognize dogs and to adapt it. That's exactly what we want to do. we want to take a model that already knows English, it knows some language, some human language, and to adapt it to another language. That's a concept that's called transfer learning. We're going to transfer the knowledge that the model already knows. And we're going to take some more, like I showed, the Llama, Gemma, or any other language. So I will take all our text. I will take some large language model, for example, Llama. I will pre-train it. That's what Kai said. They predict the next token and everything. That's called the pre-training phase. And now that I finished pre-training, the model already knows the Llama that knows only before English and some other languages. Now will know Sanskrit and Tibetan. And now we'll fine-tune it to my task. For example, Nicola can do authors identification. That's the last part. And that's the general plan. So now we're going to speak about what's the problem and what's the tokenizer in that part. So if that's the basic architecture, sentence, model, predicted word, we're going to break this, the beginning part. So if I have a sentence, the text is converted into a list of numbers, which looks like that. Don't worry, we're going to explain. This is what we're going to focus in the rest of the lecture. And now that I have a list of some units, it's an array. I convert it to some numbers, numerical representation, and that numerical representation is inserted into the rest of the layers of the model, which the model will output also numerical representation. And the numerical representation in the end of the model will transform back to some word. And we will focus on that part. That's the tokenizer, basically. Before it gets the way from a sentence, the text, into the model in the numerical representation. In a word, what's the numerical representation? It's pretty complicated. I'm pretty much going to speak about it here and in the end in a word, because it's not so relevant for you, but just so you know. Assume I have a numerical representation. It means that every token, let's say, generally every word has its numerical representation. In that case, that row represents some word, let's say. It has here like 700 numbers. If we would take it to, let's say, 3-dimensional, we would want similar words to be close to each other. For example, you see computer, Android, Facebook. I want computer words to be similar in that 700 space, generally. And I want these similar words to be separate. That's what's called embeddings of a token. But just so you know, generally, we're not going to speak about anymore because it's a whole, it's a full presentation. It's not my focus now. So tokenization. I have a word, I have a sentence, and I want a text. I want to convert it to a list of numbers. We have 3 stages: pre-tokenization, vocabulary construction, and segmentation. We will begin in reverse order. I will begin from the segmentation. Let's have a sentence, the quick brown fox. I want to, as input, the quick brown fox, and I want to segment it to a list of text units, not the numbers, the text units. So I have a few options. I can just split it to words, where that means the beginning of a sentence, the end of a sentence, and you can see we have here totally 4 words, totally 6 tokens. I can break it into subwords. TH, E, each one of them is a different token, QU, ICK, etc., etc. I can break it in that, and I can break it also to characters, and also can add the space tokens, and eventually all of them are options. The most common option nowadays is to use sub-word tokens, okay, because it's somewhere in the middle between not too many tokens, but we are, for example, lemmatization can be processed in that way, because if I have something that ends with ed, I can process it with the token ed, for example. And th usually comes together, for example. And so if I want to segment it to subwords, how would I segment it? Let's say I have these 3 possible. What is the best segments? How do I know which one most suitable? And the proper question should be, what is the best representation of the text in an array? Let's take an example, intractable. Should I put intractable in a single token, Two tokens in tract able, also pretty much common. Maybe in tract able. What is the best way? So in order to answer this question, we're going to go now to the part of the vocabulary construction. The segmentation is actually built on the vocabulary constructions. Questions so far?
How did you control the segmentation?
So actually, we will see actually examples from Sanskrit, how it happens, but it just is like a function. I put as input a text, and the output will be just, output will be these segments according to the vocabulary that we will now see, the vocabulary construction. So what is a vocabulary? Vocabulary is a complete set of text units that a segmenter, we also refer as tokenizer, recognizes and uses to convert text into a list of tokens. What does it mean? Think about the vocabulary as a dictionary of the language model. Let's say all the words that you know, that's what the whole knowledge of the model regarding the language. And in the eyes of the model, it's just like a dictionary contains tokens. So for example, what I want to do is I want to feed the model, the tokenizer, with some text, big text corpus that represents the whole language. Let's say, ideally, I want all a text that contains all the possible texts in Sanskrit and Tibetan. I want to give it also some vocabulary size that I want. I want M tokens. That's the size of the vocabulary that I want, and the output will be vocabulary of tokens, just as we saw before, so that the segmenter can take possible tokens to segment according to it. Let's say I have my text corpus is all the Harry Potter series, and I want to build a vocabulary of 50 words according to subwords. So we will see later how it is done, but this is the output. Something like Harry Potter, quid, ditch, broom. You see some subwords, some words. This is now my vocabulary, 50 words. That's the tokenizer knows. So some definition, let's say I constructed the vocabulary. That's my vocabulary now. And let's say I have here a sentence, Harry Potter plays Quidditch. How will the tokenizer will segment the sentence according to the vocabulary? Will be something like that. First of all, it will be according to the vocabulary it knows, and it will be, okay, I see how, see re, I see pot, I see tear, plate, I don't see, let's put unknown token, quid, space, ditch, etc. So now the sentence became a list of tokens according to the vocabulary of tokens. So as you can see, what's a crucial part is what's my text corpus. If my text corpus doesn't contain place, it means that the tokenizer won't recognize this place. So think about regarding your text. If there's a word that we haven't seen during the vocabulary construction, it won't be segmented properly. So the pre-tokenization is actually not so important. We're just going to brief it pretty fast. I can decide before the segment part to split it according to white spaces. For example, I don't want a space to be part of a token. I want spaces to be specific token, and you always split tokens when spaces. It's not always. I might also consider, like for example, if I have A and plays, maybe plays space A should be a single token. Not always correct. Most of the tokenizers do use white space splitting, punctuation splitting, lowercasing, and some other. It's pretty much similar to pre-processing the data. Questions so far?
I have a question. When you do this segmentation and breaking down the text into the token, so for example, in the interactable example, it creates different length, like different number of tokens, right? So how does it affect the model afterwards?
Okay, so it's a good question. We'll talk about it pretty much, including references from papers, but generally, if my segmented space is too long, so it's also gonna be cost me a lot because each token actually goes through the whole model. So I will need to have if my, let's say, my segmentation, my tokenization text is 10 or 100, it means gonna have 10 times more runs through the model. So it will be more expensive, and I will review it later. So there are known and popular tokenizer algorithms, 4 algorithms, byte-pair encoding, and those 3. All of them do the 2 algorithms that we spoke about, vocabulary construction and segmentation. There are 2 similar algorithms, but different algorithms. Now, I will review a short movie from Hugging Face tutorial of how byte-pair encoding tokenization does. Let's say I have this text. This is the Hugging Face course, etc., etc., etc. And now I will show you how the vocabulary is constructed according to this text. So first, this is the pre-tokenization stage. It's split 2 byte spaces into words. And now it's some kind of counter of how many words. And now that I have this word, I want to segment it to sub word tokens. So I have this corpus. It's not the same corpus, just for the demonstration. It's a shorter corpus, just for the example. So now we will see how this corpus is segmented into subwords, and according to the subwords, it constructs the vocabulary. So it splits every. Let's speak about it now as characters. Generally, it's bytes, but let's consider it as characters. Each word is split into bytes. Now the vocabulary are all not the byte, the characters. So I have all the characters are bytes. You see there are plenty of duplications. G, only 1. All the characters is now my vocabulary. And now I'm continuing to construct my vocabulary. I'm gonna search for the most frequent pairs. And you'll see how it is. For example, it will go from here and right and see what pair appears the most time. So HU1, UG, etc., and you see now how it counts with this context window. And now after it iterates over all my splits, it says, okay, this pair appears the most. For example, I think it's going to be LNE, and it adds it to the vocabulary because it says, okay, this LE is the most frequent pair, we'll add it to the vocabulary. And now it does the same process. Again, LE becomes part of the vocabulary. And all these splits, now we're going to be LE, it's going to merge. And it's going to be, it's going to do the same process again. When it finishes, according to the M, if you remember when I told you when I construct the vocabulary, I tell him how many tokens I want. If I want 50, after the vocabulary size is 50, it's going to stop this process. So now it's going to pick 7, it's the most frequent, so it's going to take LE and A. And you're going to see LE and A are merged again. And now this is my vocabulary of the tokenizer. Let's skip a little bit forward. Okay, so assume now this is my vocabulary. After counting all the splits, that's my final vocabulary, the basic characters and those. And now I want to do the second part, how to segment a text according to my constructed vocabulary. So I take a text, for example, hugs, and I check, in the same way I construct the vocabulary, what is the most frequent order of characters. In that case, you see, okay, HU is here in the vocabulary, HUG is also, it merges it until it doesn't recognize a merge token. So that's byte pair encoding. As you saw, there are 2 parts. First, the vocabulary construction and the segmentation. We won't do the same for the rest, just so you have the intuition how it works. Most of the known language models today use byte pair encoding. Pretty simple, but it works. So let's return back to what we want to do. We want to use the model, pre-train it, and fine-tune it according to the text that you will provide to us. So let's say, for example, a task that I want to do. Let's say I have this text, sentences, and I want to unsandi the text. So let's say I already trained the model to do it. I insert the sentence into here, and eventually the output will be some unsandi text, for example. So let's return now to the tokenizer, how it recognizes IAST text. So I checked with, I've done a simple test with Llama Tokenizer, but you see it's a bit small. I'll mark here. What I've done, you see that here, oh, wait a second. You see that row is actually where I inserted the first part. That is actually, think about it as Llama Tokenizer, and I inserted here some sentence in English. Peace be upon heaven, peace be upon space, and peace be upon earth. Just a general sentence that I took from, I don't know, from the internet. And that's what you see over here. That's how we tokenize, the tokenizer of Llama, which is built according to byte per encoding, which we saw. That's how it's, in that case, it pretty much encoded it only to words, segmented only to words. So I wanted to check how it's going, how it works with Sanskrit. Second. I put some Devanagari sentence. How I'm lucky that it's too small and you can't read. I hope it's the same translation of the same sentence. And that's how we tokenize it. You can see regarding to Kai question, how many tokens I have for the same sentence. Also here in the Devanagari, in Sanskrit, I have less characters. The segmentation is much longer. So I also tried with IAST. If the same sentence, I hope it's the translation. I'm not sure it's pretty much the same. That's the list of the tokens that the tokenizer of Llama. Llama is a model that we want to pre-train. How it's going, you see here the 3 dots, it's because it's even longer. It's truncated as part of the view. It means that for the Devanagari, it's something like 2.5 times more, and for the IAST, it's I think 3 or 4 times more. So now we're gonna speak what's the influence of longer segmentation. Compression ratio is a measurement for the influence of the tokenizer. It's not necessarily correlated with the accuracy, but it's a simple measurement that we can run before even training anything of the model. I just take the text, take how it's segmented, and just compute the compression ratio. It gives an insight of how much the tokenizer is familiar or knows a given language or a given text. Lower ratio means better result. For example, if I have the sentence intractable problem, and let's say my tokenizer segments it to the following list. So there are here 6 tokens, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And here there are 24 characters, including spaces. So the compression ratio is 0.25, which is pretty good compression ratio. So what I've done, I checked according to IAST text, Sebastian's text that we have, with some known models. You can see Llama, Buddha Gemma, the original Gemma, which I learned are pretty much the same, Mistral, and BERT. You can see that are all pretty much around 0.5. It means that for every 2 characters, I have a single token. It means that the intuitively higher ratio, what we have here, 0.5, there is lack of representation of the languages in the current tokenizer of all these models. Now I'll discuss some articles and papers in this, how the inference of non-English languages. Fertility is pretty much similar to compression ratio, but instead of dividing by the number of characters, it's divided by the number of words. It's less fits our languages because the count of words is unlike English, but it's a measurement that some papers use. So I wanted to show it. For example, for the same example from before, the fertility is 2.0 because we have 3 words instead of character, 2.0. That's the fertility of that segmented sentence. So we see here a paper. Actually, that's the paper that, if you remember, I think Fiat spoke about it yesterday, that checked how large language models perform with Indic languages. So we can see here the first was English and all kind of 20-something Indic languages. The axis here is the fertility for the same sentence translated, like translated to Tibetan, Korea, Malaysian, etc. Over OpenAI bypass encoding, the same bypass encoding as we saw before. You can see, first of all, Tibetan has the word fertility. If English has 1.6 fertility, Tibetan has 20. It means for 20 tokens for a single word. That's what it means. Sanskrit is somewhere here. 9 point something tokens for every word. How you count word, it's also a question. That's how they decided to show it. I'm not sure what they count as word. I'm not sure why Sanskrit has better ratio. I think because it's in the Devanagari, and all these languages are also in Devanagari. And then the tokenizer a bit knows already Devanagari characters because of all the Hindi, Urdu, and common languages. Now we'll show some additional related papers that discuss exactly this problem. The first quote that you see here is from Tibetan Lama, a work that pre-trained Lama with Tibetan text. They claim that the model Lama 2, which is 2 versions before the Lama that Kai spoke about, has only 315 tokens in Tibetan, out of roughly 32,000 tokens. Around 1%. Is it high? Is it low? So apparently 315 is not enough. Another quote from a model that trained, a paper that trained Korean model. It reports that non-English languages require significantly more tokens, and it affects the response times and the costs that you see here. So for example, if now you insert to ChatGPT a sentence in Tibetan or Sanskrit, it costs more than a sentence in English. Of course, you're not paying by sentence, but if you use their API and it's a bit complicated, you will pay more for the same text in Tibetan or in English. 2 quotes from a paper that researched exactly this, the disparity of tokenization in different languages. It reports the sound tokenization length, which is actually pretty much same to compression ratio. As a result, can be 15 times more than English. That's pretty much what we saw with the English and Tibetan. The English was 1 point something and the English was 20. And it sums up the consequences of unfair tokenizer to 3. First of all, high cost, as I spoke about before, more tokens, more computation. We need more iterations in our model. There is also efficiency and latency during processing. And we spoke about it a little bit before, but if I limit the length of an input text to my model, let's say I'm limiting the maximum number of tokens to my model to 2,000. So now I'm limited when, as we spoke before, the chunks that I want to train the model, it's gonna be always maximum 2,000 characters. So my chunks also might not conclude the whole text that I want to. Eventually, if the text suffers from lack of representation, it's gonna be less accurate predictions, like in Sanskrit and Tibetan that I demonstrated before. And in addition, it's just gonna consume us additional resources. So before we speak about how to train the model, we must represent it well with our tokenizer. So we have a problem. Apparently, we can't write the llama so easily, and simply training the LLM with our language is not so simple. So I'm asking you, how do you think we can solve it? That's the problem. We want to transfer learning the llama llama, and we have a problem. The tokenizer doesn't know Tibetan and Sanskrit well enough.
Before the answer, one comment, or I don't know if you're gonna speak about this. So you said tokenizers for existing tokenizers for Tibetan Sanskrit, they generate more tokens on average per sentence than for an English sentence, right? You said that will affect cost, but did you say something about the quality? Why
The quality I didn't speak. I think it's part of more the training phase. It's like it's a consequence of training, but you're right, also the quality. So
You may
what?
expect, for example, similarity. There's semantics as well, because when you represent more unique parts of the language, like characters,
Exactly.
okay? And then you will affect the implication that you want to do by representing them.
So it's not just about cost, it's also about quality. That's very important, I think.
Yeah, you're right. So what we want to do is we want to adapt the tokenizer to our languages. It's very known to adapt a model to a specific domain. Besides the fact that we want to adapt the model, we want to adapt the tokenizer. Specifically, in our case, in language adaptation, the two main parts of the adaptation is first the data that you need to provide us, and the tokenizer, which needs to know to represent well the language.
Why the current tokenizer is not good enough?
Because like we saw, there was not, I will speak about it a little bit in the end, but Tibetan and Sanskrit are known as low resource languages. All the text of Llama, ChatGPT, etc., are based on the web. The web just doesn't contain enough text in Sanskrit and Tibetan, so it's not represented well during the training and the tokenizer vocabulary. Yeah, like we show, like for Tibetan, Llama 2 has only 300 tokens in Tibetan. Wanted to ask something, Shasham?
This showed you a kind of a website which can generate basically any possible form of a Sanskrit verb. So I don't know if that could somehow help to limit the number of the tokens.
Yes, so
Theoretically, if you can use it, then it's like one verb root, and it can already link to all kinds of forms up to 108.
so it's a possible method to initialize the vocabulary for some beginning. For example, like I showed you, the BPE was initialized with all the characters. I can inject there some phrases that I believe that are common, but I want the tokenizer to understand by himself how he sees the language. If I teach him, like some example, a token from there, it might be over-representative, a long word that I don't necessarily want the model to know it as long. I want it to know it to 3 segments, for example. For example, like we saw the word that in before the intractable. Intractable might appear there as a single token, but I want intractable to be 2 or 3. The model knows the best, the BPE algorithm knows the best how it should be. So that's the problem with the initialization of vocabulary.
Functional solutions. About 2400 years ago, he was very much into localization of Sanskrit. And we feel that his contribution is likely to come. I mean, he tries to break down into parts. So, for instance, words and certain suffixes. That is the verbs, and then certain suffixes that can be applied to. And so there is a potential.
So this idea is that you try to minimize the kind of memory work that you have to do. So because according to certain rules, it's like mathematics. So you can generate from one small thing, which is basic, just kind of strictly follow certain steps, and then it will guarantee that you get the right form. So you don't have to kind of give it many forms. This is exactly the way that he wanted to present his grammar. So it's called generative grammar in a sense, but it is not in Chomsky's sense.
Yes.
So I mean, maybe you have to look at these technical issues to see how we can try to combine this thing to the model, but I don't know how feasible it is technically, I mean, from your side.
It is an interesting comment, because what you're mentioning is something which we refer to as symbolic symbolic methods, where what all these entities data driven, and maybe you can synergize both approaches and get to a better representation, okay, whole representation, and with the synergy of both
Yes.
methods.
So one way to maybe combine the two approaches, because yeah, I agree. I mean, this is completely data driven, right? The tokenizer learns from the data how to break the text into tokens. But if we, so we can maybe help this tokenizer by presenting some known sub-tokens in advance, right? So build the vocabulary as a pre-processing step, maybe with some number of tokens, like very common endings, morphological endings, suffixes and the prefixes and something. Now there was some people already worked on this kind of solutions and in other languages. I don't know about Sanskrit. I don't think I've seen anything like that. But I've seen something for Arabic and Hebrew, for example, which is also they're also rich morphologically languages. And apparently the contribution is so it's very hard to measure the contribution of something like that because it depends how you measure what the downstream task you measure, right? So maybe here it's going to be an interesting case study for measuring that. But in general, for Hebrew, what they've shown that morphologically aware tokenizers they don't contribute more than data driven, which is an interesting result. But again, this is not confirmed and definitely not evaluated enough, I think, on relevant tasks as what we have here. And I think that's a very good idea to try.
One also somehow suspects that it's possible that if the data-driven model works just as well in cases where we have such a massive amount of data, but when we have a much smaller amount of data,
Yeah,
perhaps the morphological
will help more. Yeah.
And I think, I don't know if it really matters because this thing itself is the kind of their own traditional way of understanding the language. It's not something that we wanted to bring in. So I don't know if that makes a difference. Because it's a kind of ancient thing and it's kind of
and therefore also any commentators
Yeah.
will be analyzing
Exactly,
the words
in
in
the
the
words.
text, the comment,
Yeah.
precisely in
In this
accordance
way.
with this
Yeah.
tokenization.
Mm.
of them.
right.
So that could also affect numbers.
Yeah.
A,
Very good point.
a problem with the tokenizer, by the way, is how to evaluate the tokenizer. How we evaluate the tokenizer is either compute the fertility or compression ratio that I showed before and I'm going to show next, or you train the model, run it on benchmark task, and then it's pretty expensive to check the tokenizer, but for sure it's feasible to check it with the measurements we have today, which is compression ratio. I can just inject the tokens that it's suggested by this website and check the compression ratio. It's of course doesn't cost anything. And part of my research, and we'll speak about in the end, is also how to evaluate the tokenizer. If I could evaluate the tokenizer in advance before training, I could have said to you, it's a good or not a good tokenizer, for example.
Conceptually in mind, maybe you can compute it or that convention, it seems to have most words are two syllables. And then particles like and, but, and whatever else, the smaller words are usually one syllable. And rarely do have very long multiple syllable words. Would this mean that language would naturally have more tokens for passage of text?
It probably does, but I'm not sure.
The 0.5, then evidence that.
Yeah, it's so according to the known tokenizer, we saw specific to Sanskrit, not to Tibetan, but it also depends on the vocabulary construction, how it's being done. According to byte pair encoding, probably you're right. It's gonna be too many tokens, like not too many, just a lot of tokens, more tokens, exactly. Because what you in the other word, I think that Tibetan has less characters for a single word, unlike English, but I'm not sure. You're gonna say probably better. Like for example, if you take a word intractable, I'm not sure there's a translation in Tibetan. How many characters does it have in Tibetan?
Yeah, the problem with Tibetan is that we have a space after every syllable. So the question is, how is the computer recognize where the word starts and where the word ends.
I see.
This
So
is the problem. So that I think
Opposite
affects.
It's the opposite.
So we have actually, there is a paper that I'm going to review, Tibetan Llama. Someone already pre-trained Llama to Tibetan. I guess the solution is just not to pre-tokenize according to spaces. That's the solution. There are tokenizers, unlike BPE, that doesn't that doesn't do space splittings.
But it takes space as a character, like.
Not necessarily. No, sentence space, for example, there's no, I think there's no space character.
Yes.
And the Tibetan Llama, I think, used the sentence space.
But you're talking about the wiring.
But it's also
Representation,
it's also that in Tibetan you have a dot, so our space in one stands for a dot, so it means there is a separation after every syllable. And there is no special separation between words, so you have to somehow know if you, I mean, you have to know the language and you have to understand what you're reading in order to know, okay, this word, I mean, as Ryan just said, many words, I mean, Tibetan is considered a monosyllabic word, which means that actually every syllable is a bearer of a meaning, but it doesn't mean that all words consist of only one syllable. So you would have words like, I don't know, housewife, yeah? So it's like two components put together, but in Tibetan, you will not write it together, you will have a space. But you will have to recognize somehow that this is one word.
So,
And with the help of, I mean, Ryan said, of course, we would have also a lot of words that only one syllable, like fish, yeah, so that would be one. But most of the words are two, and then you would have kind of, words that are longer compound, but in a way, they're compounded, but they are serve as a word or a term, which have more than two, we have 3 or 4. And then you have these typical particle things that we would find, and they stand also alone, which is easy to stack because it's just one list of so and so many particles. So
This is an important comment, but once we understand that these are the situation, actually it's a random.
yeah, yeah.
so first of all, if we return to here, probably bytecode encoding uses space splitting, so that's why Tibetan suffers from the worst fertility, I guess. So we already.
Super interesting insight.
Yeah, I think it's a good conclusion from this lecture. We already learned that we can do space splitting with Tibetans.
Sorry for my ignorance. So the more tokens we have, actually is not the worse this is for us, correct?
So
And where we have a problem where we have so many, right?
yes.
And now we're trying to understand why there are so many.
Yes. So
you guys maybe did address, but you mentioned widely, because in Tibetan script itself, we have a single letter, right? But when you romanize it in widely, then we have like even one single sound, we have at least 5 or even 6 different letters that we use to represent one single sound, right? Which in Tibetan is just one. But in when you transcribe it, then we have like but it becomes so long, and this seems to be one of the factors why it causes this maximize or elaboration of this token, right?
Yeah, it was interesting for me because I mentioned I had a Zoom with Asaf, and like he said, I can't deal with this widely. So the thing is, for us, naturally, we start with the Tibetan and we see graphically how it is. But if you start from widely, then you just have a string of just kind of letter and
Just
you have no
one sound,
idea, like, well, what is going on there, yeah? But for me, when I see, or for anyone who knows you see it as normally, yeah, a syllable is just one vowel, and then in Tibetan you could have, I don't know, up to 6 consonants there, or maybe I'm wrong with the number, but anyway, so it would be several consonants with one vowel, and it will be a syllable, which is very uncommon for a language that we normally know. But if you don't know how the Tibetan syllable looks like, which happened with Assam, for example, so he just says string of something, and he think, okay, what is the correlator, what is the prefix? But I see immediately a kind of a graphic thing, and of course I know the rules after some time, and then I know, okay, this is the correlator, this comes up, this comes down, this comes before, this comes after. So I realized it only then when I saw what happens when something starts, the point of departure is this while, right? You have no, you cannot arrange it graphically in your head somehow. So it doesn't make sense if I tell you this is the prefix, this is the superscript. It doesn't make sense because for me it's just one line. And it occurred to me only when I talked to him that
But you guys may have a suggestion to solve this like elaboration of. I was thinking, because it's completely from a lay people's perspective, because the vowels shall we put it like that? The vowels embedded in a cluster of consonants should actually can be reduced to just 4. Because we cannot have a syllable without a vowel. So if this idea we could somehow play with it, and that's what I mean. I don't know.
To break it. Like
No, actually, we have just we may have several consonants, but doesn't matter the unit. You have to see whether it is in the middle of something, whether there's a vowel.
But this is clear through the space, so
No, because you did mention it also depends how we define a token, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
if this idea we could use to this background knowledge to understand, maybe we should in Tibetan case define token somewhat differently, mainly focusing on the vowel characteristics, because it's a syllabic language and we must have one vowel at least to make it a syllable. But in this case, we can only have, I don't know.
Yeah, so it actually connected with the space. The space will be between, okay, except some exception that you would have 2 vowels in one, so to say, unit, which is kind of a giant, but okay, that also isn't too tackle.
Theoretically, I think, first of all, theoretically, if I have a big enough text corpus that considers all the Tibetan possible words or phrases, so the algorithm that I showed is supposed to learn how to study, and it will output the best representation either way. I think that in our position that we don't really have enough text, I think we need to find some solution like you mentioned, because only in this kind of meeting between us and you, that you know the linguistic properties of the language, we can define a proper tokenizer, which you see that the large language model tokenizer suffers from. Any additional notes, Nicola?
The question, but do we already know that Tibetan script and Tibetan Wiley are tokenized in 2 different ways?
We're gonna see it now in Tibet. Yes, it's different characters. It's gonna be tokenized differently. Will it be exactly parallel tokens? I guess not exactly. If we have enough text, it's supposed to be pretty similar, but not the same.
After we build a tokenizer with the Tibetan script, maybe we can duplicate all these tokens in Wiley as well, and enrich the tokenizer. Yeah.
So it's another big question. Maybe we should in advance we should only consider either Wiley. If the transformation between Wiley to Tibetan is deterministic to both ways, so maybe we can only train our model according to either Wiley or Tibetan, and before the model, if you insert like a Tibetan string, just convert it to Wiley, and then like I can train the model better. Or I can choose to train the model on both options. It's another open question. We don't really know how to answer it right now.
But maybe Nicola is asking, right now, if you take a tokenizer of Llama or Gemma, right, that they were mainly trained on Latin-based languages, but probably Wiley, they will know, the conversion ratio will probably be lower than on Tibetan. I'm assuming.
We saw it in Sanskrit. In
Yeah.
Sanskrit, the IST suffers from a very high compression ratio.
Because accidentally, it has
It means a lot of tokens, right?
Yes. And it's not that the best option is, it's not that I want least tokens. It's somewhere in the middle. Because if I have theoretically, I can say, okay, I'll take the full text as a single token, but then it's also underrepresentative. So it's somewhere in the middle. It's not a linear. Some other notes, it's a good discussion.
That's rather technical, but you mentioned that you can dissolve Sandhi in Sanskrit texts. Would you want, for instance, to dissolve Sandhi and then represent the text in a different way before analyzing it?
It's a good question. Like maybe, do I want the model to know only unsandhi text, or I want the model already to know Sandhi? It's a
compounds or outflows. What's in compounds?
It's a good question. Actually, intuitively, I would say I want the model to train the language as is, meaning Sandhi, not to perform unsandhi, because I want the model to learn just like a little kid. I want the model to know how the language. Think about exactly like teaching a kid a language. It's pretty much the same.
Children Sanskrit, we need to tell them where to break words. And that's the thing that I presented yesterday as the first thing in the commentary, that you need to know the word.
Yes.
If you're learning as a baby, then language.
But actually, when you read it, it's not like all as a whole, right?
Children are not babies. We're really talking about how babies learn.
Not babies, but children, yeah.
First of all, to perform a task of Sandhi and unsandhi, it's in the fine-tuning task. We can, after pre-training, whether to feed the model only with Sandhi or unsandhi text, it's a question. I think that in Gemma, for example, it does both. So the text that we have from Sebastian has both of them, Sandhi and the unsandhi. Eventually, we might use both of them, but I'm not sure.
Keep in mind that if you're using a preprocessor to unsand the text before sending the text into the tokenizer, so it will introduce some errors as well, because this model is not deterministic, right? It will be a probabilistic model that will make some mistakes. So those mistakes will propagate into the model. So that's another aspect to consider.
So obviously, Tibetan and Sanskrit need a specific treatment.
Yes.
Now I will show, like from the literature, some solutions to adapt the tokenizer to non-English languages. First of all, from the same papers that I showed before, which review few large language models in the Indic languages, they conclude, as you can see here, that the tokenizer must be adapted to gap this disparity. Another paper even claims that we must train from scratch the whole tokenizer with a proper tokenizer. It's a bit maybe too much, but another view. If you remember the graphs that I showed before of the compression ratio for non-LLMs, just remember how we calculated the compression ratio. I will review it again because I'm going to show some tests how I computed the compression ratio after adapting the tokenizers. It's the number of tokens in the nominator and the number of characters here in the denominator. In that example, 6 tokens, which is the length of the array of tokens, divided by the total number of characters, including spaces, punctuations, every single character. And that's what we have here, around 0.5. Remember, low compression ratio. It means it's better represented generally, but it's not totally correlated with the model's ability. Remember that. First of all, I ran this, if you remember the 4 tokenization algorithms, I constructed a vocabulary over around 2-3 million text from Sebastian Sanskrit transliteration in IAST using this non-tokenizers that we have reviewed. So first of all, what I checked, according to these algorithms, BP, Rotis, Unigram, and sentence speed, it's not models, it's tokenization algorithms. I constructed a vocabulary, and then I tested the compression ratio over another different text, and you see already around 1/3 compression ratio, which is comparing the known tokenizer is already like 1.5 times better already, according only to 3 million texts that are inserted to it. So now remember that, and I'm going to explain about it even more later. Some related works of adapting non-English languages. Two I chose to focus on. There are plenty. I'm going to show also some in the end. We're close to finish. When do you want to finish?
We have 2 minutes basically, but we have breakout sessions, so maybe we can. How long do you need?
I have like 10 minutes roughly. Depends how we'll discuss doing them.
Don't steal 10 minutes.
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, so I chose two models that adapted tokenizers to just so to open your minds. First, Chinese Llama, based on the Llama, known as the flagship pre-trained non-English model to an Asian languages. Generally, what they've done, they just took a lot of data with plenty of computational resource and adapted the tokenizer according to it. DictaLM, based on Mistral, in addition to the fact that it's for Hebrew, that it's related to us emotionally, there are some important principles that I will discuss. So Chinese Llama, what they done, they just, as I mentioned, they added 20,000 tokens to the vocabulary using sentence piece, which is what we spoke before, that doesn't do space splitting. They provided an example of taking a sentence. That's a sentence in Chinese, the original sentence. The original tokenizer of Llama, just like I showed in the beginning, that's the segmented space, the tokenized space. And after they train the tokenizer, that's the segmented space. You can see the length of the original token is 35 and the trained tokenizer is 16. So the compression ratio is the same. A question here, someone?
The codes there are the bytes basically, because the tokenizer couldn't.
Exactly. It wasn't trained on enough Chinese Llama, Chinese data set.
So these are unknown, I mean, those are the bytes, non-existing tokens, basically.
So it's not unknown, it's just like that's how the Llama tokenizer reads it as byte.
The vocabulary, because I noticed that these things which are not recognized are not as frequent as the ones which are recognized.
Exactly. So it's even.
And the main challenge with these unrecognized tokens is that during training of the model, they were not introduced to the model at all. So the embedding representations that also at the beginning are just meaningless. So the model starts from a very bad point, right? Trying to understand what's going on.
So the question I asked myself, first of all, why did they choose to add 20,000 and eventually the vocabulary size is almost 50,000? And how can I find 20 giga text data? It's a problem that we have Chinese. It's, I don't know, the second biggest country in the world. Probably there are plenty of Chinese in the web. There aren't so many Tibetan or Sanskrit speakers, especially not ones that have Facebook. DictaLM, it's has less resources than Chinese. There's less Hebrew speakers than Chinese speakers. So they had to implement some solutions to bridge the gap of the size of the data and less resources, less computational resources. So you remember compression ratio, that's a graph showing compression ratio, a number of added tokens. It means they ran the same test that I will show you later. They just added 5,000 tokens, 10,000, and check what's the compression, the average compression ratio. They claim that the band here, it is the best compression ratio. And after adding somewhere around 1,000 tokens, every another additional token just is not worth to be added. That's what we claim. So this is pretty simple. I can do it tomorrow and check how many according to this method. And it's a nice method. To deal with the lack of data, they've done something really interesting that we also wish to adapt. They first produced a pre-training model with translation capabilities. Afterwards, they used the trained models that they've done to translate English to Hebrew. And then you continue to train the model according to the translated data. So they had, for example, like Kai explained regarding the instruction tuning, they took a data set of instructions in English, used their pre-trained model to translate it to Hebrew, and then done another training phase over the translated instructions. It's kind of like the baby taught himself how to speak. And it's also important because we don't have a single data set, a single text for the instruction tuning right now. It's probably going to do something similar
But
to that.
this is basically using synthetic data, right?
Yes.
So any work.
Yes.
It's not just synthetic data, it was supported by synthetic data.
No, it's synthetic, it's like the Hebrew is translated. The English is original, the Hebrew is translated.
So you have instruction.
I have instructions in English, I just, the synthetic part is just, it's translated. It didn't generate by itself the answer.
You didn't tell him to generate
No.
instruction data. You
And that
do
would mean-
instruction data set. Right.
And that's only instruction tuning, so that's not for the.
Only for the instruction tuning. There are some more works, there's a Tibetan Lama, there's nothing genius in this model. Probably they basically use sentence piece, which was what we heard before. It's done some experiment and got results. Those are some more. We have, like I showed, there are plenty of Asian pre-training. We will use methods that they have used in our model. Most of them eventually just expanded the vocabulary, tried some training, and saw what's the outcome. We hope to do something a bit more clever. So some experience, because I have only 5 minutes left. What I will show you now, I took 3 million texts in IST, the one that we spoke about before, Sebastian. I constructed the vocabulary of 8,000 tokens that we saw, that's the compression ratio we saw before with this algorithm. And I expanded known large language models by 1,000 tokens. By 1,000, just for the experience, I took from DictaLM the number 1,000. And the best, the 1,000 tokens that I chose are the best. I'm not gonna deep into it, just consider the most known 1,000 tokens. So remember the compression ratio, that's the original compression ratio of Llama, 0.458. After adding 1,000 tokens in of IAST, that's the new compression ratio. You can see the numbers. It's almost like 1/3 times contribution, and it all has been done on a different text, not the text that I constructed the vocabulary. You can see that BPE and Unigram has the best, the most low compression ratio, which what we are searching for. And I also checked what are out of the 1,000 tokens that I added, which tokens haven't appeared already in the vocabulary. So you can see sentence piece constructed 810 new tokens that the tokenizer of Llama didn't know already. BPE, the list. It's pretty logical because Llama uses BPE to construct its own vocabulary. And there are some more experiments with BERT I've done. You can see again sentence piece. This is a really good compression ratio comparing to the original. The same with Gemma and with Quen. It's pretty much the same numbers. So almost like, I don't know, 2/3 of the tokens doesn't appear already in the exit vocabulary. And the improvement is around 1/3 or 1.25 in the ratio.
So what is the purpose of all those experiments?
The purpose of this experiment generally, I see, okay, sentence piece, for example, in that case, added 820 tokens. It means it improved the vocabulary. In addition, sentence piece gained the best compression ratio. So I know now that maybe sentence piece is the best out of all this algorithm in order to, regarding Quen specific model. And when I see a lower compression ratio, I know that I fed the tokenizer with new words that it didn't know before.
And what is the difference between models? I mean, in each slide you have just different model, right?
Yeah, so when each one of them, eventually if they all use, for example, byte per encoding, so the difference is just the corpus that it was trained on.
And the number of tokens in the vocabulary.
Yes, exactly.
Due to the different code.
Yes. No, the input of the vocabulary construction is the corpus and the number of tokens you want. For example, with Llama 2, I showed it 33, 32. So what's my research field generally regarding after what we saw here? First of all, Assume I want to expand to adapt my tokenizer. How do I decide how many tokens to add? Which tokens are the best? We haven't talked about it at all. And maybe I should remove existing tokens that represent wrong. Like for example, in Tibetan, which is in Latin characters, maybe English tokens affects badly the tokenization part. How to evaluate it is exactly, Shanshan, what you asked us. How can I know after a tokenizer compression ratio? It's intuitive. It's not a good measurement. How can I check if my tokenizer fits Tibetan or Sanskrit before training and running on benchmarks? We haven't spoken about it at all, but embeddings also, to train new embeddings is very expensive. Assume I add a token, I need to add an embedding, exist embedding to the tokenizer, but for another lecture. And maybe we should even construct a new vocabulary constructor like BPE to figure out something new. Spoke about it even more. One last thing before questions. I have 30 seconds. Out of the papers that I talked before that showed some LLMs with Indic languages, you see here all the Indic languages it performed on, I think 28. And they gave a score of how low resource languages it is based on the availability of web text sources. For some reason, Sanskrit got a medium. I'm not sure why. Maybe because I spoke to someone yesterday, there are Sanskrit speakers nowadays in India that speak it. So maybe, I don't know, they post in Facebook, post in Sanskrit, or write papers in Sanskrit. Tibetan here is a low resource. And
why Sanskrit performs not so poorly? Because I mean, of course, the Sanskrit speakers, the number is very small. But other Indian languages, they absorb a lot of Sanskrit vocabulary.
Exactly. That's the next thing I wanted to know. Exactly. Devanagari, it's the same, like
it's the script. It's not the language, it's the script.
Yeah, the Devanagari is like the same alphabet. Like we compare English to German, it's like comparing, I don't know, which Devanagari, Marathi to Sanskrit, for example. So that is what we need you. In addition to the fact that we need data to train our model, we need data to train how to construct a vocabulary. And that's it. Questions?
If you go back to this previous, again, I'm thinking of possible factors why Tibetan is anyway very low, is because again, do we mean Tibetan in Romanized form or do we mean Tibetan in Tibetan script, right? So maybe only one of these is considered and the other has just been ignored.
So here they refer to the Tibetan script, not to widely.
Yeah, only maybe few Tibetans use Tibetan script.
The web, I think it would be in, unless they use some of these, some of our text, but if they use like Facebook or whatever text, you can see in Tibetan script. There's no Tibetan.
The problem is also they write web resources, so.
Yeah, and
kind of the web and.
Right, in Tibetan.
Sebastian so far?
What?
What Sebastian used so far?
Sebastian used, I'm not sure if he used widely Tibetan or both. In Sanskrit, I know that all his data is in IAST.
Okay, but what kind of vocabulary?
So we assume that that he didn't add any tokens. He used the exist vocabulary of Gemma, and that's why the compression issue is the same of Buddha Gemma and Gemma. Buddha Gemma is the model for Sebastian.
We asked him specifically.
You asked him?
Yeah, and that's what. So they didn't
No adaptation for the.
No.
We saw that the adaptation helps.
Yeah, we saw like in Chinese
Other-
Lama
yeah,
and Dict
other-
Thailand, for example. Any additional questions?